As an Asian ecofeminist theologian, I think in this time of ecological disaster and transition of a civilization, I think Asian people have something to share with the entire world for the new spirituality for the 21st century, which is coming from our ancient cultures and religion and people's movement. And especially the Asian cosmology from Buddhism and Taoism, which is based on oneness of everything and this interconnectedness with all beings and harmony of yin and yang and the whole philosophy of interliving. I think this can be a good clue for the new civilization.
Mm-hmm. When you say ecofeminism, how would everyday people understand that?
When I teach ecofeminism to my students and women in the grassroots, I told them ecofeminism is a joining of two streams. One is ecological movement and feminist movement. And many people in these movements, they realize that oppression of women and oppression of nature are directly interconnected. For example, in the West and the East, the nature is always symbolically represented as women, while man is represented as culture. So when men conquer the nature with their culture, they use this metaphor of rape of virgin forest. And Francis Bacon said, nature is like a vicious witch. The more you torture her, she will reveal her secret. So somehow this chaotic disorder and this natural force and women's power were connected, and man's way of controlling women and controlling nature were just interconnected. So ecological activists and feminist activists got to the point that they have to make a common solidarity line to fight against this ecological disaster and oppression of a woman. I think feminism, feminist philosophy, and like a Buddhist philosophy or Taoist philosophy have something in common. Their radical rejection of dualism. I think Western culture has been developed in the metaphysics of dualism. So this world, this cosmos is divided into two elements, like spirit and matter, reason and emotion, and soul and body, and men and women, God and human beings, and celestial world and material world, heaven and earth. So everything is based on this dualistic thinking. Buddhism say radical no to any kinds of dualism, and feminism also challenges this hierarchical, patriarchal dualism, and Taoism also reject dualism. There are yin and yang, but it's not dualistic entity. It's a shaping, it's a changing of our shape. When yin become very strong, it become yang, and yang become strong, it become yin. So it is like a continuous circling of energy. So we carry yin and yang within us. Men carry yin and yang within him, and women carry yin and yang within us. So it is continuous changing of form according to time and space. Therefore, this cosmology will be a good corrective to this Western material or scientific worldview, which is based on dualism and linear understanding of history, which is very teleological, like a goal-oriented linear historicism.
How is that a clue to how we can live in the 21st century?
First, I think we have to change our view on ourselves and our neighbor and our nature. I think it is really metanoia, real conversion to the earth, conversion to our neighbors, because we have had this idea of a separate self, but there's nothing like a separate person and separate self. Even every cell of our body is product of sun and ocean and trees and earth and our ancestors. Therefore, we carry whole galaxy in our each cell. And our neighbor's cell share same thing, same earth, same air, same water. So we are not really separated. And in terms of energy world, our energies are all interconnected and interflowing. Therefore, we have to get out of this illusion of separate self. This separate self, especially coming with this enlightenment thinking in modernity, the most desirable person is autonomous person, like a Kant said. You think, you dare to think in your own. So autonomy become a cultural idea. But in our generation, autonomy is not enough. So many autonomous person in our previous generation, or our teachers' generation, what they did was they alienate people who are different from them as other. Especially white elite middle class heterosexual man has power to define what is normative and what is not normative. The person who is not white, who is not man, who is not heterosexual, who is not highly educated, these people are considered as other. And there's a separate from me and other. That kinds of culture was the basis of culture of alienation, separation, and eventually culture of violence. If that person is so other, you can eliminate them. That is the basic military training. You never think your enemy as a human being. You think your enemy is the other and target, just object. So we have to get out of this kind of separate thinking when we understand other human beings. And also when we look at nature world, we have to think ourselves as a part of nature too. Why we think that we are human beings and trees are nature? We are nature too. We are part of nature. So we have to remember that our cell, our body water contains ocean water. And our body, our cell contains minerals from this earth and rock. So we are family with rocks and ocean and this sky. So we have to remember, like really remember all these members in this cosmos.
You also consider yourself a liberation theologian. And what aspect does that bring?
I think as a Christian and as a liberation theologian, I believe the Jesus' radical teaching of a preferential option for the poor. I think people who are oppressed the most, whatever reason, because of sex, race, class, and sexual orientation, or they're like a differently abled people, they know something we don't know. If we want to know about sexism, you have to ask women.
Mm-hmm.
We have to know what is the nature of racism. You have to ask women of color or African American people who are oppressed the most because of the racism, or Native people, the First Nation people in this country. And if you want to know about cultural imperialism, you have to ask people who become victims of 500 years of Western imperialism. Therefore, I have this conviction that they have an epistemological privilege. People know because they suffer so much. If you want to know the battering and violence against women, you have to ask women who are beaten rather than batterer what it's like to be battered.
Absolutely.
So as a liberation theologian, I want to listen to these voices. I want to learn from this epistemological privilege of these oppressed people and lift up their voices. Because as an intellectual, I have a platform which many oppressed people do not have. So if I become an echo of their voices, I think I do my role as a theologian, as an echoing the voices of the marginalized people.
I've also heard you say that as an Asian theologian, you have to develop your theology not just for the 2 or 3% Asian Christians, but for all of the Asians.
Yes.
How do we recognize that?
In Asia, the Christian population is less than 3%. So like what my mentor Aloysius Pierre said, doing Asian theology with only Christian idioms and symbols, which has been basically Western, the Christianity we received, is esoteric luxury of a Christian minority. And when we think about people of God, it's not just 2% of Christian people. Entire Asian neighbors, they are also people of God too. Whether they are Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, I considered all of them as child of God and people of God. So in this time of ecological disaster, in this time of, world become humongous, the single market, we have to build a community of everybody, not just Christians. So inter-religious solidarity for wholeness, for building community of justice and peace and integrity of creation is so urgent for all of us. So when I do theology, I have to take consideration of these 98% of non-Christian people in Asia. So my accountability is not just Christian community, but entire Asian community.
You've also said something that it's rarely heard, that one of your spiritual resources, the fountain from which you learn, are the people's liberation movements.
Yes.
I need to hear more about that, since I don't hear about that too much.
Yeah, it's like if people ask me, what gives you life? What gives you vision in the time of despair? I will say people's determination to make their life better, people's determination to make wrong right, and their resilience, their tenacity, and their this undeniable hope give me tremendous vision. It makes me keep going. So it is my spiritual resources. So even when I'm very, very despaired, when I go to women's group and grassroots people's group, try to make local policy for a betterment of their community, or women working for battered women, they make a shelter for these women and children. I feel very moved. It's like they make fountains of wholeness in this time of brokenness. So very small, but when you make these small fountains and small place of peace and justice in so many places of the world, finally they become the majority. And in my lecture, I talk about ant and spider strategy.
The ant and spider, yes.
Strategy, even sometimes what we are confronting is like a big elephant and these lions and tigers. But when we become a very, very small ant, and we make this tiger and the elephant is so itch all over the place, they have to give up,
Or at least they have to scratch.
Yes, and also, when we make a small horse in this big, humongous pyramid of patriarchy, someday this small horse will make this pyramid collapse. And we also have to make a networking, making connections all over the world among grassroots world. I use this. This is really kiss of the spider women. We all become spiders and make a web and web. Then suddenly, even big bird can be caught by our spiders.
That's
spider web.
That does happen in nature.
Yeah.
You also said something very striking, which was that social analysis you considered one of the deepest spiritual disciplines.
Yes.
Again, it's not something in our secular world or in our church world that we often connect together.
I think social analysis is a deeply, deeply spiritual act, because we want to know everything as it is. We name it clearly. Name the devil,
The principalities and powers.
Power in this world. If we do not do very hard social analysis, without knowing, we join the sin of complicity. We can say, oh, we didn't know. That's not enough. How long we just keep going to say, oh, we didn't know that. That's what Germans said about Holocaust. 6 million Jews were executed, and you just cannot say we didn't know, Not just the Germans, and, like a first world country, even the third world country, they're always first world people. And they're always elite people, highly educated people. It's very easy to say we didn't know.
What is it today that we people need to know? What is the secret of today?
Secret of today?
That we need to be able to analyze and reflect upon, look at our social structures.
I think for me, my part of the world, like third world women, the impact of globalization in our time is that something we really have to look into. And this so-called savage capitalism make a whole world as a humongous market, and everybody who cannot survive in this unlimited competition, you are nothing, and you are eliminated in this continuous production circle. And this impact really destroyed our nature and many human community and human cultures. And this globalization is most advanced colonialism. And it comes with the sexism. racism, cultural imperialism, and classism. So we have to really analyze what is the impact of globalization in our time. I see that is the kind of a clue, the most important clue, you start the social analysis.
So how is it possible to be a Christian or a spiritual person in a capitalist world, the majority of the world right now, with a few exceptions?
It's very hard. It's like great temptation of our time, because like TV and radio and everywhere we go, they tempt us. The greatest temptation of our time is money and buying power. If you buy this, you will be somebody, And the way they tempt us is not like colonial power, It's like they didn't force us. You have to do it, otherwise you will be dead. But it's a seduction. They are beautiful. They are sexy. They are, allure and attraction. They try to tempt us. If you do this, you will be somebody. We have to go back to our original teaching. Jesus said, you cannot have two gods, Mammon and God. What we are worshipping now is Mammon, this acquisitiveness. So maybe we need a cultural movement among Christians. How we be fully alive, fully human, not very much with material possessions, but this spiritual connection with our mode of being rather than mode of having. It's a great challenge.
Indeed. You also embody this pluralism of life-giving resources when you speak about your history and your traditions of Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, Christianity. Now, there's some resistance in this time of transition, as you call it, to a new millennia, new civilization. A resistance to this mixture, because we are so used to the separation. So, what do we do with that? With that resistance, knowing that we need to mix?
People mix because they need to survive. People mix because they need to liberate themselves. One resource is not enough. That's why we mix. Then I will say, mix gently, mix gracefully, as much as you can take. But I think it's a vision of the 21st century. World become very small because of internet, computer, and this transportation. I envision the world. We have to learn both from East and West, both from Christianity and Buddhism, Taoism and Hinduism and Muslim. What matters is not creed or doctrinal purity. What matters is liberation. What matters is the wholeness. What matters is survival and sustainability. And we don't have much time. Really. We don't have much time left, and we don't have much resources left. So we bring every wisdom tradition to give a chance to next generation. So, we don't have this luxury of talking about our doctrinal purity or purity of our creed. We have to get down to the earth and have to ask, which teaching will help us to solve this puzzle of end of Earth civilization. We are the first generation of the people who can witness the extinction of Earth civilization. This is very serious, very scary and dangerous time. maybe you live this beautiful Vancouver with this plenty of water and forest. But I envision someday, not very far from now, we have a war over clean water because people cannot have clean water anymore.
And where's the opening?
I have a vision. I may sound very naive, but we really need spiritual conversion first. We have to change our own view of the world, ourselves, then lifestyle. Then we have to start like ants and spiders in our own locality. Maybe we support organic farmers. Maybe we have to pay more dollars for this food, but we have to support these farmers who will do differently, earth-friendly agricultural, work. We have to support local vegetable sellers, local bread makers, local clothing makers. Yeah, like what I'm wearing now. And we have to be very active in local politics. So people in the localities that not in our land. You cannot build nuclear, the research center, and you cannot build this dump site. So we have to really fight back to this humongous power to monopolize whole world with this market mentality. So we have to make a connection. We have to let people know, let our neighbor know what's going on in the world. And we have to be a very diligent people, really. So it's like every moment we have to have an active resistance. And wherever we go, that is our place of praxis. We don't have to go to Latin America, South Africa, or someplace else to be with people who are fighting for justice.